Everyone says El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment failed. The headlines wrote it off. The IMF pressured them to back down. Crypto Twitter declared it dead. But while the media was busy taking victory laps, El Salvador quietly built the most crypto-friendly tax regime in the Western Hemisphere. Zero capital gains on Bitcoin, zero tax on foreign income, and a digital nomad visa you can qualify with just $1,460 per month in income. The people paying attention, they're already there. Fight me in the comments if you think I'm wrong. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats. We've spent over a decade helping remote workers, digital nomads, and location-independent entrepreneurs find their ideal second residency. And I'll be honest with you, El Salvador was not on our radar until very recently. But when we dug into what they've actually put together here, it jumped straight to the top of our recommendation list for a very specific client. Stay tuned, because what I'm going to break down is exactly how El Salvador's territorial tax system works, why their crypto laws are genuinely unlike anywhere else in the world, and most importantly, who should and who should not be considering this option. Because this isn't for everyone, but for the right person, this could be a game changer. If you're serious about international tax planning, second residencies, or building a truly location-independent life, you need to subscribe to this channel. Immigration laws, tax treaties are changing faster than any point in modern history. Countries are rewriting the rules, closing loopholes, and adjusting programs, sometimes with just weeks of notice. We break down what actually matters so you can stay ahead of the curve instead of reacting to it. Hit subscribe and leave a like so that the content I make for you actually gets sent to you. All right, let's get into it. El Salvador officially launched their Digital Nomad Visa program in April of 2025. This makes them the newest player in Central America's increasingly competitive race to attract remote workers. And they came out swinging, with terms that undercut almost everyone else in the region. Here's the basic structure. You get an initial visa of 1 to 2 years depending on your application that is renewable, and you can extend your legal residency up to 4 years total under this program. From there, pathways to permanent residency exist if you decide El Salvador is where you want to plant roots long term. The income requirement is where things get interesting. You need to demonstrate a stable monthly income of just $1,460 per month. That's it. For a family of 3 or more, that number bumps up to $2,190 per month. Let me put that in perspective. Portugal's Digital Nomad Visa requires you to show approximately 3,500 euros per month. That's over 4 times the El Salvador threshold. Dubai's virtual working program requires $5,000 per month. Spain, Italy, Greece, they're all in that $3,000 to $4,000 range. El Salvador looked at the market and said, we're going to make this accessible. And that low barrier to entry, combined with what I'm about to tell you about their tax structure, is what genuinely makes this compelling. Now, let's talk about the real reason you should be paying attention to El Salvador, the tax situation. El Salvador operates on what's called a territorial tax system. This is fundamentally different from how the United States or most European countries handle taxation. In a territorial tax system, only income that is generated within El Salvador's borders is subject to Salvadorian tax. Income you earn from foreign sources, meaning clients, employers, or businesses located outside of El Salvador, is simply not taxed by El Salvador. Let me say that again because it's important. If you are working remotely for a company based in the United States, or if you're freelancing with clients in Europe, or you are running an online business that serves customers around the world, El Salvador does not tax that income. Not a reduced rate, not a special deduction, it's zero. Now, I need to be clear here. If you're an American, you still have obligations to the IRS regardless of where you live. The United States taxes its citizens' worldwide income no matter what. But for everyone else, Canadians, Europeans, and Australians, and most other nationalities, El Salvador's territorial tax system means your foreign-sourced income stays in your pocket. But it gets better, and this is where El Salvador separates itself from virtually every other jurisdiction on the planet. Under Article 36 of El Salvador's Digital Assets Issuance Law, profits from buying and selling Bitcoin and other digital assets are completely tax exempt. Zero capital gains tax on cryptocurrencies. This isn't a loophole. This isn't an oversight. This is an explicit, intentional policy designed to attract crypto investors and blockchain entrepreneurs to El Salvador. Think about what that means. You buy Bitcoin, it appreciates, you sell it. You keep all of that money. In most countries, you're looking at capital gains taxes ranging from 15 to over 40% depending on the jurisdiction and your income level. But in El Salvador, that tax bill is zero. For crypto traders, for long-term Bitcoin holders, for anyone who's built a significant wealth in digital assets, this is extraordinary. There are very few places in the world where you can achieve this combination of legal residency, low cost of living, and zero crypto taxation. Now you might be thinking, okay, Brad, but what about El Salvador's whole Bitcoin experiment? Didn't that fail? Let me give you the real picture. In 2021, El Salvador became the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. President Bukele made it mandatory for businesses to accept Bitcoin alongside with the US dollar. The international response was mixed, to put it mildly. The IMF criticized the move. Credit agencies got nervous, and domestically, adoption was slower than the government had hoped for. Fast forward to December of 2024, El Salvador negotiated a $1.4 billion loan agreement with the IMF. As part of that deal, they agreed to scale back some of the Bitcoin mandates. Businesses are no longer required to accept Bitcoin. The government wound down its direct involvement in the Chivo wallet. Bitcoin is no longer accepted for tax payments. But here's what didn't change. Bitcoin is still legal tender in El Salvador. The crypto tax exemptions remain fully in place. The National Commission of Digital Assets continues to regulate and license crypto businesses, and the government has indicated that it will continue accumulating Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, IMF deal or not. What El Salvador did was mature its approach. They moved from mandatory adoption to voluntary adoption within a regulated framework. For digital nomads and crypto investors, this is arguably better. You get the tax benefits and legal clarity without the instability of forcing crypto on a population that just wasn't ready for it. Let me walk you through exactly what you need to apply for El Salvador Digital Nomad Visa in case this is starting to sound interesting. First, you need proof of remote work. This means a contract with a foreign employer, letters from international clients, or documentation of a business registered outside of El Salvador. The keyword is foreign. Second, income verification. You'll need to show bank statements with stable monthly income meeting the threshold. That's $1,460 for individuals and $2,190 for families. Third, a criminal background check. This needs to cover the last 2 years from any country you lived in during that period. These documents need to be apostilles and translated into Spanish. Fourth, international health insurance valid for the duration of your stay. And then fifth, a valid passport with at least 6 months of validity beyond your intended visa period. For the application itself, you have two options. You can schedule an appointment at an El Salvadorian consulate and apply in person, which typically takes 15 to 60 days, although it can be longer depending on backlog. Or you could apply online, which is significantly faster. We've seen processing times of 5 to 9 business days for online applications. The fees for all this are remarkably low, between $40 and $70 depending on where and how you apply. Once approved, you have 120 days to enter El Salvador. One important requirement to understand: you need to maintain a physical presence in El Salvador for at least 6 months out of each year. This isn't a flag of convenience visa where you get the residency and never show up. They expect you to actually live there. Now let's compare El Salvador to the competition because you have options and you should understand the trade-offs. Portugal has been the darling of the digital nomad world for years, but Portugal's famous NHR tax program has been gutted. The income requirements are now higher and the cost of living has skyrocketed in Lisbon. And if you don't particularly need to be in Europe, Portugal's value proposition has now declined significantly. Costa Rica, the other obvious comparison in the region, uses also the same territorial tax system. But Costa Rica's cost of living is notably higher, the bureaucracy is more complex, and they don't have an explicit crypto tax exemption that El Salvador has codified into their laws. The traditional choice in the region, Panama, has the friendly nations visa, but the financial requirements are higher, and you typically need to show more capital or make a very large investment. Panama City is also significantly more expensive than anywhere in El Salvador. Think more like US prices. Then, of course, there's Dubai, the other crypto tax option. But the visa requirements there are $5,000 per month in income. The cost of living is multiples of what you'd spend in El Salvador, and the lifestyle is completely different. When we map all this out, El Salvador emerges as a clear value leader. The lowest income requirements, explicit crypto tax exemptions, territorial taxation, US dollar economy, and a low cost of living. Now, none of these tax benefits matter if you're scared to leave your house, so let's address the reality of safety in El Salvador versus the reputation. I know what you're thinking. You've heard the stories. El Salvador was, not that long ago, the murder capital of the world. In 2015, the homicide rate was over 106 per 100,000 people. That was then. Here's now. In 2024, El Salvador recorded a homicide rate of 1.9 per 100,000. Let me put that in context. The United States homicide rate hovers around 5 to 6 per 100,000. El Salvador is now statistically safer than the United States. The country recorded 279 days without a single homicide in 2024, and they've logged over 800 total homicide-free days since the security reforms began. International observers now rank El Salvador as the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. President Bukele's aggressive security measures dismantled the gang structures. Now, you can have whatever opinion you want of the politics of how that was achieved, but the practical reality for expats is that El Salvador in 2025 is a fundamentally different place. Tourism is booming, investment is flowing in, and the expat community is growing. So let me give you some practical details for actually living there. The currency is the US dollar. This is huge. No exchange rate fluctuations, no conversion fees. The cost of living is genuinely low. You can rent a comfortable apartment in San Salvador for $400 to $700, a beachfront place for $800 to $1,200. Monthly expenses for a single person typically range from $800 to $1,500 depending on the lifestyle that you prefer. That's a fraction of what you'd spend in most US cities. Internet connectivity is reliable in the urban areas and the tourist zones, not quite Tokyo level infrastructure, but absolutely workable for remote work. So, who is this perfect for? If you're a crypto trader or investor looking for a jurisdiction where your gains won't be taxed, El Salvador should be at the top of your list. If you're a remote worker for a US or European company, and you're not American, meaning you can actually use the tax benefits of escaping your home country's tax net, El Salvador lets you keep your full salary. If you're American, you'll be able to get away from some of it using the foreign earned income tax exclusion, but that will require some careful planning. If you're running an online business with international revenue, El Salvador's territorial tax system is designed for exactly this. And of course, if you're an early adopter who wants to lock in residency before the program tightens, El Salvador is offering generous terms right now that won't last forever. So, who is this not for? If you need EU access for business or travel purposes, El Salvador doesn't help you much there. If you're an American, you do still have IRS obligations, although they will be lower. El Salvador's territorial tax system doesn't help as much as it does with some other countries, but it can still help significantly with the right planning. You will need additional strategies for that. And of course, if you can't commit to spending at least 6 months a year in El Salvador, the physical presence requirement makes it impractical. So here's our advice at Evolution Expats. El Salvador is a legitimate option that most people in this space are completely overlooking. This is a new program. The terms are favorable because they're trying to attract people. History tells us that as programs mature, the requirements tighten, the benefits shrink. Portugal's NHR is the obvious recent example. The people who moved early locked in the benefits for a decade. The people who waited got nothing. So every month you spend thinking about this instead of acting on it is tax savings you will never recover. And this is exactly the kind of decision where a consultation saves you real time and money. There's no one-size-fits-all answer when you're moving abroad. Your tax situation, your nationality, your income sources, all of that factors into whether El Salvador is right for you. If you're serious about exploring this, book a consultation at Evolution Expats. We'll look at your specific circumstances and map out the best path forward. The people who build real security in this world are not the ones that were born with options. They're not smarter than you. They simply moved while everybody else was still waiting for the perfect moment that never came. At some point, you have to stop researching and start doing. So if El Salvador isn't quite the right fit for your situation, check out our Digital Nomad video playlist. I break down the options across Americas, Europe, and Asia so you can find the destination that matches your circumstances the way you want to live your life. The link will be in the description. And remember, the right information makes it all possible. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and I'll see you in our next video.